Well, it's that time once again here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Time to talk a little fishing. And to do that, welcome back in from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, weekly wildlife conversation, Chris Dunnavant. And Chris, this week we get to recap the Bassmaster Classic, the Super Bowl of fishing, the Daytona 500 of fishing. That concluded last weekend down in Louisiana. And the actual event itself is going to air on ESPN2 today. Actually, right now as we speak, it's airing on ESPN2. But spoiler alert for those of you who don't want to know, we're going to talk a little bit in depth about the Bassmaster Classic. And first and foremost, Chris Lane taking the Classic this year. Total bag 51.6 pounds. Are you familiar with Chris?
You know, Chris and his brother Bobby, the Lane brothers, they're big Florida anglers. That's where they made their name. And they came on the scene after I got out of fishing. So personally, I do not know them, but they are excellent anglers, powerhouses in Florida. There's something about Florida that when there's folks figure out how to catch bass in Florida, it's probably one of the most unique places in the country. That if somebody can just get dialed in Florida, they can dominate. And the Lane brothers, they're two that dominate. In fact, Chris won a tournament just a few weeks prior to this Classic, the Southern Open, the Bassmaster Southern Open, which earned him an automatic berth into next year's Classic by winning that tournament. And so then, of course, by winning the Classic, he gets an automatic berth. So he's a double qualifier. I mean, so he's on a roll. He's on a hot streak.
What is it about Florida that makes the bass fishing so unique down there?
I think it's the weather and then the lay of the lakes. They're shallow, grass-filled lakes, and also they're Florida strain bass. Florida strain bass are very sensitive to weather changes. They don't react very well on good periods of stable weather. They're awesome to catch, very active. At periods of cold fronts and barometric pressure changes, they can get real finicky. And there's a lot of heavy vegetation. You're fishing in miles and miles of water that looks the same. And the experience that those Florida guys have, they can know in a 2-mile stretch that there might be 2 30-yard stretches of grass that are, for some reason, better. The fish are funneling in there, and they just have that knowledge. But it's more than just spots. It's an instinct for how those Florida bass react during different times of the day and year and the weather changes. And it's just proven over and over again. I can think back on Florida anglers like Shaw Grigsby, who just really made his name big time in the beginning in Florida. Terry Scroggins, now the Lane brothers. And, that's Florida is just one of those unique areas.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries. He is definitely our fishing expert, folks. No doubt about that. He's proven it time and time again, doing so again here as we recap the Bassmaster Classic from this year. Kevin Van Dam was going for the three-peat, Chris, and came up a little bit short, finished in 11th place. As you were following along with the tracker, was there something that you noticed that maybe contributed to that? I mean, you obviously said that it's important to get off to a good start. If you struggle on the first day, that could sink you for the tournament.
Yes, and Kevin admitted that he just got off to that bad start. It's all about his decisions the first day, and that was exactly what happened when the last time the Classic was at the Red River. He had the same thing. He said the first day he just didn't have that right start, and he improved every day. His weight improved every day. His standings improved every day, but he just didn't get off to that fast start. And it comes all down to the decisions. In fact, Chris Lane, that decision he made on day one, he had 2 areas that he wanted to fish. And he had to lock through to fish one. And the Red River system has a series of locks and pools. And he decided, like the night before, I'm going to stay in the pool where the launch ramp is and fish this spot that's close by first. And that really turned out to be the decision that won the tournament. And then the next most important decision was day 2. I'm going to let this spot rest. I know it's going to be packed and loaded with people. I'm going to go down and lock down and go to this other place. And that's where he scored the biggest bag of the tournament, and that really, catapulted him into first place and ultimately into the winner's circle.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. And Chris wanted to talk about the Virginia anglers that were participating in the Classic. John Cruz came in 30th, total weight of 20.3 pounds, and then Kelly Pratt came in 43rd, 13.5 pounds. Even with their finishes, they both get a nice little $10,000 take-home prize, which isn't too bad. You had a chance to talk with John a little bit about the Classic. What were his thoughts?
Well, he is very interesting. John had 2 good days. He had good, solid catches of fish, but in a tournament like this, you have got to really catch them to get up there in the top, and it can just be a few pounds separates those. But he actually shared water with the winners and also with Alton Jones, who finished 4th. And, he caught about 25 keepers on day 1, he said, and 15 keepers on day 2. He caught almost all his fish on his own bait company lures, the Missile Baits Plastics. And so those were really well. But the first day he was sharing water with Chris Lane, and he said he and Chris know each other, friends, and there's a very narrow ditch that went through the area. The fish in a very shallow area, like a foot deep, but it had a little 18-inch ditch through the middle. Some stumps and pad stems, and the fish were moving up in there, especially in the afternoon, becoming active when it warmed up. Mm-hmm. And their boat was actually touching while they were fishing, and John was fishing the right side of the little ditch, and Chris was fishing the left side. And it just is a difference of a couple bites. So a 4-pounder versus a 2-pounder, yep. And that's the difference at the end of the day. And then he said Alton Jones was also fishing that area. Alton fished it all 3 days, and John was shared it with him on day 2, and it was a matter of, again, Alton got in there a little bit before him, caught a couple 3- and 4-pounders where John caught 2-pounders, and it just, that's just the way it goes. But it's interesting, reading on the internet, Alton Jones made a comment about fishing with John that day. He said, "I have to give a lot of credit to John. He is very quiet and very courteous to fish around. I gained a ton of respect for him this week." So they're fishing a small area, and that can be a real opportunity for heads to butt and tempers to flare. But they really work together, and they had to be quiet. He made that comment of being quiet because it's so shallow. They were turning their electronics off, trolling motors on low, push poling even, putting the power poles down so they weren't even moving at all, and just making very long casts. Because in water that shallow, those fish can be really spooky. So, John was clearly in the right areas, and it's just one of those things where it didn't happen for him. And I know what that's like, and he's been on the other end of that too, where sometimes you're fishing, sharing an area with somebody else, and the right fish just come to you for some reason, and then some days the other guys catch them, and you're doing the same thing, and you can't explain why. He catches a 4-pounder and you catch a 2-pounder, but it happens.
Well, and at least for John, certainly some comfort knowing that his strategy and the way he went about his business down there, obviously he was making the right decisions.
No doubt. He was on the right fish. He made the right decisions. And in this game, it's no different than any other sport. It's just a game of, seconds and inches and just, little things go a different way. But he had a solid performance and something to be proud of. And, just being at the Classic is just a privilege and an honor. It's something that you can't take for granted, and I know John doesn't. And so it's good to be there, good to represent his sponsors and to be a part of that. Apparently, I've never been to it as a competitor, but apparently it's just you're really just treated like royalty for a week, and it's really a great event to be a part of.
Well, and to gain the respect of obviously some of the top anglers in the profession as well, why you go about it. I mean, John's still a young guy, and he's still very young in his fishing career. That's important too, that people respect how you go about your business and that you do it in the right way, and that can only help, I'd imagine, moving forward for him.
Oh, you're exactly right. A guy like Alton Jones, who is a former Classic champion, well respected in sport, been around, a veteran. And, that goes a long way. That'll come back to John. That will help him. Not that this one incident, I'm sure he's built that respect and appreciation with the other anglers over the years. But, that can only help. That will come back to him and help him one day. But I think John would say that's just the right way to go about and be a sportsman in this in the industry. And so that he's just doing the right thing.
Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. And Chris, one last thought of the Bassmaster Classic. As you surveyed all the numbers, where do you think this one ranked in terms of total bags? You think it was higher than normal, right about average, or a little bit below?
Well, it's one thing. It all is dependent on the body of water.
Sure.
Some bodies of water, like when they were up in Pittsburgh years ago, it was around 20 pounds one. It may not even been that. So it's all relative. But this was probably really par for the course for that body of water this time of year. The weather was really up and down. It was warm, and then there was a big cold front a week before. It was cold weather and rain, and then it warmed up a little bit, and then it actually kind of went down a little bit during the tournament. And for the fluctuating weather, these were some good catches. Those fish really would surprise you. It seemed like all the top anglers were really keying on some of the pre-spawn fish, but they were also really keying on those fish that were moving up into the shallows to take advantage of the warm weather and the warm water to not only spawn and to feed, but some of the anglers were reporting catching fish off of beds, whether actually sight fishing for them, seeing them, casting their bait to them, or blind casting to areas where they knew they were setting up to spawn around stumps and pads. So for the conditions that we had, these guys really dialed in and caught them really well. It was a good catch.
Chris, before I let you go and before we wrap up our conversation this weekend, you may have to watch this on DVR, perhaps, because you guys are certainly going to be busy with the DGIF up at Bass Pro Shops. I know you alluded to that in our last conversation we had last weekend.
Yes, absolutely. Bass Pro Shops Spring Fishing Classic this weekend. It's the vendor booth weekend, so there'll be vendors there. We're there with the DGIF booth. I'll be there. Our fisheries biologists are there. So come to Bass Pro. Lots of great deals and sales and great opportunities, activities for the kids. But come out and see us and say hello. And yeah, I've got my DVR set for all the classic shows. There's like 3 of them to cover all 3 days. And but also, folks, if you miss some of the coverage and you want to really kind of get in and learn more, there's 3 sites that I would recommend. Of course, go to Bassmaster.com. That's the tournament organization, their home site. Bassfan.com is a very excellent place. They had coverage each day. And also BassEast.com. And that's actually the person who runs that website right here, local Richmond area guy. And but they've got some great audio. They've got an interview with Chris Lane. They've got a video link to the press conference after the final day. They've got videos and stuff. So really great coverage. If you want to really learn more about the Classic and get all the inside scoop, behind the scenes stuff, go to these sites and you'll learn a lot.
So basically, what you're saying is, if you want to sound like an expert, like a Chris Dunnavant, for example, go to these sites, right? You
can go there and you'll know more than you need ever wanted to know about the Classic, and it's a lot of fun.
Chris, really great stuff this weekend. Looking forward to looking over my shoulder and watching a little bit of the Classic coverage on ESPN2 while we wrap up the show. Thank you as always for the time, and we'll catch up in 2 weeks.
Sounds good. Thanks, Anthony.
Again, Chris Dunnavant from the Virginia Department of Game and Inland Fisheries, our weekly wildlife conversation here on the weekend with Anthony Opperman. Stay tuned. Got my game plan for the weekend coming up.
The show is almost over, but the weekend is just getting started. More of The Weekend with Anthony Opperman is next on Sports Radio 910.